Oral sodomy. Yep. Naked rape by a beast, bestiality. This was not what Hollywood thinks is classy.
It was so cold that steam was literally rising off of her naked body.
The longest creature transformation on film with no cutaways to help you to the people watching it.
But it all really depended on the beast within, whether you believed this thing was a cicada driven by an Indian legend.
I started out trying to write short stories and novels, and I couldn't do it. And in desperation, I became a screenwriter. I was writing transformations, creature transformations. I had witches turning into monsters and animals and, you know, all that kind of stuff. We thought we were doing low-level genre material that was the way to get into the business. It was the way to start out.
Or it's leftovers for you.
TV movie like Initiation of Sarah, Beast Within, Cloak and Dagger, Psycho 2. Those titles had a longer life. They have a life of their own. And I've been involved with some, Child's Play. I've been involved with so many of them. And I had no awareness of it at the time. None. I had written an original screenplay called
Sorry, baby.
Border Crossing
Sorry.
that Harvey Bernhardt liked. And so Harvey had me in, and he had bought a book that hadn't been made. What Harvey had was, all he had was the title, was The Beast Within, which he thought was cool. So I had to write a screenplay that came up with The Beast Within. And The Beast Within, of course, to me seemed like a transformation movie because of the title. You had to have the beast inside.
I was really brought in to make it pretty explicit, or I don't know how to describe it, but they liked the visceral stuff in Mad Dog Morgan. The studio was very impressed by the budget. They wanted to know how I'd made that film for $300,000. And that's how I got hired.
I want money, a lot of it, and I want out.
First thing I did when I got home was read the script. But in the version I had, the main character got raped by a giant grasshopper on the first page. And I thought, no one's read this script. Impossible, it's got United Artists on it. So anyway, I go to meet the head of the studio the next day. My agent positions himself behind the head of the studio so that he can make faces at me, and the first thing the studio head says, Steve Banks, says, so, Philippe, what do you think of the script? And my agent's going, and I go, yes. And he says, no, what do you think of it? And I didn't know what to say, but because it was a horror movie, what popped into my head was, I think it's great. It's like steak tartare and, raw meat. And that's just what popped into my head. And he looks to his assistant, Anthea, I remember her name was, a great lady, Anthea Silva, and he says, steak tartare? And she says, Philippe is French, Steve. Philippe's French. And Steve Bark says, Philippe, you're the man for this movie.
Can you do the magic like the locusts and the cicadas? Change and be reborn? You believe that shit?
When I was writing the screenplay, I was looking for a metaphor in nature for what was happening to the boy. And I was looking for a way to foreshadow it visually.
Michael was really, for all intents and purposes, a normal kid. I mean, he had this genetic thing inside him, like a time bomb waiting to go off, that's tied into the 17-year life cycle of the cicada. Because, people don't realize that cicadas hibernate in the ground for 17 years, and then they are born and make that hellish cacophony, that sound that sounds like power lines gone mad.
Which I had meant to be a sound design, which of course they never did either. But I mean, that's the screaming that the cicadas make, the high-pitched buzz. Writers are always complaining. That's why I became a director.
This curse that my father was afflicted with and then is passed on genetically to me through the rape of my mother in the prologue of the film. Bibi Besh, her character, is attacked by this thing that used to be human but has now become this creature through this, curse, this Indian curse, and this magic that he used to make himself strong enough to break out of this imprisonment in the cellar, but by that point it has transformed him, the magic, and he is no longer human.
That's a pretty intricate plot, and one of the issues when the film came out is that some of it doesn't quite add up.
Well, what does it mean?
I don't know.
What I was doing was I was taking the theme from H.P. Lovecraft's basic theme is that the sins of the parents are visited on the children. They echo back, and that's what I was doing there, because Michael's father had essentially cursed his son to revenge him. And so Michael was biologically, predestined to become this monster.
All of this is in the movie. It's all still there, if you listen for it. However, other things are going on, and people tend to focus on what they're looking at and what action is happening or what other bizarre goings-on are there, and they're not always listening to what the characters are saying at key moments like that. So this is all, what I'm saying to you now is all explained in the movie if you pay careful attention, but most people don't, and so therefore they don't know what the hell's going on.
This plot now has become part of the jigsaw puzzle for the people who are really into the film, and they like figuring out all the details of the plot.
I wrote this I thought, just a great screenplay, I thought, and then they could only do sections of it because of where the technique was, the technical ability was at the time. So you get this talk about the cicada, but you don't really know what they're talking about in the movie. But that was because they couldn't show the actual insects.
There were some plot points that were cut out, but as I say, that was a bit of a tangle with the various scripts and everything.
Michael, the boy, would look out the window of his hospital room and he would see on the tree, he would see the bugs, the cicada falling off and falling to the ground. And so that was foreshadowing. And when Michael threw himself out the window, the way the movie is, it's over there. But the way the movie was written, he went through the tree, knocking all the cicada off. And so the cicada was laying on the ground, semi-conscious, and the cicada are falling down from the tree, because that's what they do. They climb up into the trees to molt, and the cicada are falling down on him and around him, and his last image is looking over and seeing one of the small cicada bursting out of its shell, which of course is what's going to happen to him in the next 2 or 3 scenes. But they couldn't film that. It just wasn't possible. But anyway, that's where it was at the time. I'm not criticizing anybody, because that was the state of the art at the time. It wasn't possible.
For some reason, and this has aggravated Tom Holland and me for years, we're good friends now, by the way, I should say that, but they never wanted us to meet. And so I never met Tom until after the film was made.
I thought that they were going to pull some footage like from Living Desert or from some nature documentary that they could use, but nobody ever did that.
But, if they'd introduced me and Tom, there would have been no ambiguity.
Harvey Bernhardt, the producer who recently passed, it's a business to them. They weren't, there wasn't a lot to get that extra step. And once he had the screenplay, of course, he wanted me out of the way so they could make the movie as quickly and as efficiently as they could.
Atlanta or maybe Houston, the first thing we got to do is get him the hell out of here and someplace where they know what they're talking about.
The studio, for financial reasons, had told Harvey that it's to be shot in Mississippi. Harvey said, we're going to be shooting in a disused mental asylum. And the first day I was there, a guy came up to me and he said, do you have any matches? And I said, yeah, and I had some matches. And I gave him the matches, and he put the whole box in his mouth and started eating them. Like this. I was waving to the assistant director. And then I said, this is not disused. And then, so then there was a big deal. I said, no, we've locked them all up, and that won't happen again. But it did happen again at a crucial moment when I was filming Tom Berman's heads. There was an array, maybe 3 or 4, to show the different phases of Paul's transformation into the beast. We're shooting away, and behind us, I suddenly hear, and I turn around, and there's like 4 or 5 inmates. You can tell because they're in uniforms with weird hairstyles and stuff. And I realized, oh my God, they think this is real. because it looked like surgery, because there's lights look like surgery. And I said to the AD, get them out of there. And they're completely freaking. They think it's real.
The creepiest aspect of the hospital isn't even in the movie. There was this amazing basement of this place. I took a bunch of photos of it at the time. I've never seen anything like it.
What the hell's down there?
Imagine a whole basement floor looking like it had been sunk under the ocean, with barnacles growing on the walls and this mold. I mean, it was the creepiest atmosphere. And walking through these rooms, I'm telling you, there were things down there that absolute horror movie material. Archaic instruments and things that are not used anymore. Weird hydrotherapy equipment, these marble tables with straps and weird contraptions and tubes and things coming out of the walls, and absolutely medieval looking. And so just walking through this cavernous basement, all these rooms that clearly were disused, really helped, you know, get one into the frame of mind one would want to be in.
Mississippi itself I found fascinating. I loved the, you just point the camera in that small town and you don't have to do much more. It's kind of strange.
This doctor, who was the head of the place, told me some very interesting stories. Apparently there was shades of Silence of the Lambs. There was a patient there who had gotten a hold of a spoon of which he sharpened the edges of the spoon. He sharpened to a razor sharpness, and he attacked someone with this spoon and took out scoops of flesh with this spoon, which he then ate.
I've often thought, you know, did any of that sort of seep into the movie? I read in the local paper that someone had been arrested for oral sodomy. And I thought, what in the hell is oral sodomy? I didn't even want to think. Anyway, so I said to Harvey, who did have a sense of humor, I have to say, thank God, otherwise we couldn't have made the film. I said to Harvey, have you ever heard of oral sodomy? And he says, no, well, it might, I think it's a general thing. It's in the South. There's like, it can mean all sorts of things, but it's bad, you know. And I said, well, let's have LQ. Let's get that line into the script because it's really amusing and weird.
Oral sodomy, huh? Well, that's why it's a small town. Yeah, we'll look into it. Thank you for calling.
The cast helped a lot making it strange. They were totally into the humor of it.
And so what you had at that moment in time were all these great character actors. It was the ensemble that Peckinpah was using. They're all Peckinpah actors.
And I said, well, we'll make this a kind of encyclopedia of horror films in terms of acting and reaction and sinister stuff and weird hints.
So it was this phenomenal cast in what everybody considered to be a grade D horror movie, even though it was coming out from United Artists.
Ronnie is like, what's the word? And this is not, I mean this in a good way. He's very straight. And I needed that. I needed to have Mr. Everyman straight to go through this like really strange town and these strange people and this completely crazy transformation of his son.
I told you there was nothing wrong with our son. Nothing that some simple, decent medical care couldn't cure.
So he helped ground the picture there.
He sang a song that actually appears in the movie briefly in the prologue on the honeymoon night. He and Bibi Besh are driving and the radio is on. You hear this song playing called Old Devil Whiskey. Well, that's actually Ronnie singing that song and playing the guitar on it. And Les Baxter wrote the music.
Come here.
I wanted Stella Stevens for the mother originally, and I remember having a lunch with her and reluctantly explaining the rape scene. I could see her going.
Rape. Rape.
She didn't want to do it.
Maybe it wasn't described that way.
Bibi was just a wonderful lady, wonderful actress, and I was so saddened when she died so young of cancer. It was a real tragedy, but I was very fond of her. LQ, man. Oh man, just a wonderful raconteur. He's a witty guy. He has this quietly wry, deadpan, humor. He's a very funny man, but doesn't laugh a lot. He has that intense, serious look, but he's really funny. Very funny man. But to look at him, you wouldn't know it.
Don Gordon and I got on immediately, and I was a fan of his from Papillon and all those movies he made with Steve McQueen. When I met him, he had just shaved his head basically for something, and he said, I'll have to wear a wig for the movie. And I said, well, why don't we make that part of the character, and we can have a gag at the end where he loses his wig.
R.G. Armstrong, another amazing guy. Now here's the thing, R.G. in many films has been this, you know, incredible badass, tough guy, right? Scary. I mean, oh my God. And yet, in reality, he's this gentle, quiet man.
What's that? What's that bandage?
It's nothing.
Well, nothing you don't see.
Only a guy who has that kind of toughness of reputation could get away with crocheting on the set. In between, he actually crocheted, and he would talk about his spice garden, and I mean, it was just like not at all stereotypical. So, you know, another terrific actor, great character. They all were.
Logan Ramsay was fantastic, and I told him about the steak tartare story. So when he's doing the meat, he's doing steak tartare. That was our private joke, you know. That's how the director got the job. Steak tartare. Stuff's going through his fingers.
The effect was so macabrely funny that behind the camera, you know, the crew and especially Philippe, he was jamming a handkerchief into his mouth so as not to burst out laughing. He had like tears pouring down his face of laughter because it was that funny. He's jamming a handkerchief into his mouth.
Boys always dropping things. I guess you play with yourselves too much.
It's one of the hardest pieces of acting I've ever had to do, was get through that without laughing.
He's on the floor with guts all over the place and parts and pieces. They wrapped and everybody left, but nobody remembered to go get Logan out of this stuff and get all that junk off. And you hear this distant yelling from the house. You hear, Tom Hubba, come get the guts off me, boy.
They hired Tom Berman. Tom did a brilliant job with what was known as possible at that time.
We had full reign to create whatever we were going to create. I sent most of the stuff because we were still making this stuff while it was being shot. So my ex-brother-in-law at the time, he was the makeup artist on the set. And he would call me up and panic because we made these particular artifacts to be used in a certain way. And Philippe would want to enhance it, so he'd have Tom Herbert, the makeup artist on the set, he'd have him cover it with blood. When you cover something with complete blood, you obscure what you did and all the detail in the work. Philippe thought it was adding to the horror. I think it's taking away. Less is more when it comes to blood. Blood is an art all in itself. You know, like when the creature sheds its skin and it's in a tree, that's one of those things where he just poured blood over the whole thing. You know, you're not looking at it and going, what is that? But we'd made this fine little parchment kind of skin with its, like a snake skin, with all the hands and all the features, and dried up and twisted around in the tree. But you know, he covered it with blood. He just didn't know.
It shed his skin like a cicada.
I kept that. It was made of fiberglass. I kept that thing for some years afterwards, and I wound up lending it to a friend for a Halloween party one year. And he, for the longest time, he kept forgetting to get it back to me. Well, it was, at one point, it was lying in the back seat of his car, wrapped in plastic, okay? And it had this gel blood on it. And one of these joggers, apparently, during their run, looked down and saw what they thought was a murdered body wrapped in plastic, all bloody, lying in the back seat of this car, and they called the police. And the whole thing got turned into a crime scene.
And what artist can say that the homicide squad showed up to see whether his work was a dead body or not? Anyway.
I wound up being mentioned as the murder victim in about 6 or 7 newspapers that day. The LA Times, at that time, Herald Examiner, a bunch of other papers, the Santa Monica Evening Outlook, they all ran this story. Yeah, so I got to see my own obituary.
Early on, I was with Tom at his studio, and we talked about stuff. He'd made some great little models. We went through it bit by bit.
Drawings, sketches, and then we did a mock-up in clay, and Philippe Mora came in. He liked that. And I don't remember exactly what we used for research. I'm sure we looked it up and then tried to figure out what we were going to do in terms of creating somebody transforming into an insect-like creature.
I was happy with everything right up until like the third act when I saw the transformation. You know, and then I said, ah! Ah!
And one of the things that I thought was great, which was a mistake.
We're shooting and Philippe's yelling more. So we had gotten the shot, and once the balloon went poof out through the eyeball and went out like that, and he says, oh, I love that.
And I'm going, blow, yeah, bigger, more, blow. And on Paul's back once, it burst. It actually, you see the bladder. And I thought, oh, that's great. Just use that.
When it splits open, you see these two bladders. One was sort of greenish yellow and one was red. They were like balloons, really, but covered with all the methyl cellulose and the goo. They look like weird insectile organs or something.
I said, no, you can't use that. You can't use that. And he used it.
How does anyone know what the inside of the beast within looks like? Mistake to who? It's a totally unreal situation anyway. We've invented a beast, all of us involved in the film. And to the extent that these things don't happen, yes, it is surreal.
I felt he held too long on the boy going through the transformations with the pneumatics because it got silly. And indeed, Philippe did hold too long because he thought it was funny.
But it's not a funny moment. You know, what is your intention in that scene? The intention wasn't to make something funny. Make something horrific.
He may not remember it that way, but I do.
And I like the fact that it goes on and on and on, the big transformation scene. You know, normally transformations are, quick and that's... But as a kid, when I saw a horror movie, the only bits I liked was the weird stuff and the transformations. You want to see that guy turn into a wolf in The Wolfman. That was kind of in the back of my mind, was if I was a kid, I'd like to see this go on and on.
God, I could have slapped him.
I don't think I showed enough.
And even though it technically was a mistake, I love it too. I mean, it's, as Philippe had said, who's going to know what the organs of this alien, insectoid creature are going to look like? I mean, it's a frickin' katydid, right?
State of art at the time. People were just like amazed. Oh my God, they've got air belt bladders under there that they're blowing up. That's amazing. They can do that under a fake skin. Well, now it looks really, really hokey.
And the studio were a little concerned. They asked Harvey and me to tone it down. And Harvey said to the studio guy, okay. And he turned to me, and I'm like, and he went, and then we walked away. He said, we're not toning anything down. I said, we're not doing anything. They'll never look at it again. Paul was just excellent, and he gave it his all. I mean, I knew he would. I'd seen him in a couple of things, and I thought he was a terrific young actor.
Oh, I like Paul. He's a nerd also. His mother is a famous actress, and he's a horror, fantasy film nerd. He knows all about what's going on. He's also a writer.
Before I became an actor, when I was younger, at one time I thought I might become a makeup artist. And then later on, because of my good friendship with Tom that developed during the making of The Beast Within, I actually wound up working for him, for the Berman Studios, and I have credits on the film One Dark Night, Meg Tilly's first film.
He came over and he wanted to work on it, so I kind of hired him because he just wanted to do it and gave him kind of fun little things to do.
I sculpted two of the corpses, of the reanimated corpses in that film.
We were discussing the film before we started shooting. He said, I'd like to be the Beast.
It was literally a dream come true to be able to, star in my own monster picture and play the title Beast, of course. So the kid in me was absolutely delighted at that. That's why I insisted no, I got to be in the costume.
I said, what do you mean? You are the Beast. He said, no, I'd like to be in the suit. And I said, well, that's really a stuntman's job. I mean, it's a big, heavy thing. No, I want to be the Beast.
I learned to regret some aspects of wanting to be the Beast only because of the nature of the costume. It had these large eyes, which would look like larger versions of my own blue eyes.
That very first day of the shoot, and I said, action, and I said, Paul, action. And he's standing there.
That thing was It was a great suit. It was articulated, and that I could, moving my chin, the mouth would work, and had all these inner cables and workings, and it was very sophisticated, actually.
Paul, and I hear Paul's little voice in this echoing in the scene. I can't see anything. Where is she? I can't see her. Where is she?
But it was not really designed very well for seeing.
So anyway, I grab him and help him down with the AD, help him down on top of the woman. And he's just on top of her, nothing. I said, Paul,
All I could really see out of were these two tiny holes, which in fact were the nostrils of the beast. So I'm looking through these two tiny holes, you can't see, So I'm muffled, I can't hear well because the ears, everything is covered.
Birds and the bees, you know what happens in this scene? It's nothing. So, I can't see anything. What? Where is she?
Philippe exaggerates a little with his imitation of my voice.
Out of frustration, I grabbed the beast's butt and to get some movement, because it was really, so I'm going like this, backwards and forwards.
I was not able to really see or hear, so it was like working with someone who's blind and deaf.
The next day, I get a call from the studio. Philippe, look, we're looking at the dailies, and we're really impressed by the graphic nature of what you're doing. We're very happy, but the question we're all asking ourselves is, in that very graphic rape scene of Bibi, there seems to be a man's hand that comes in and out during the rape. Who is that? I said, we cut that out, editing, we cut that out. There was just some technical difficulties. And he said, thank you. And then he said, and by the way, the stunt woman seems to have panties on while the beast's on top of her. I said, by this time I was frustrated. I was so stupid. And I said, look, the beast's member is so hard at just going straight through the underwear. He goes, thank you for clarifying that. That's thank you. Keep up the good work. There was a stunt woman was used in the swamp, in the mud. It's really cold.
She deserved a medal for what she went through, because it was, not easy to be lying in the freezing woods. At least I was warm inside that suit. The
assistant director, I said, action. He whips the blanket off, and there's this beautiful naked woman. The key grip was standing next to me. And I just turned to him like this, and his eyes, almost like Jim Carrey in The Mask, his eyes were sort of like this. He proposed to her like the next day, and they got married while the film was being made. The MPAA there was a huge tussle with the MPAA on the certificate, because up until The Beast Within, there hadn't really been a studio movie that was that graphic. But they were very big on severed limbs. They didn't want any severed limbs. Well, of course, we were full of severed limbs. And there was a negotiation about take bad language out and you could swap them for a severed limb. So they'd say, well, you can have 2 fucks in reel 1, there's no severed limbs in reel 2, but if you want to lose the fucks, you can have the severed limb. I mean, we were going to do a crazy negotiation like this. And the one cut I'm really sad about is that when the beast pulls Don Gordon's head off, which was a big deal to get the MPA to let us keep that shot. Beast pulls his head off and his bow tie flicks into the air, and I'd done a slow motion shot of the bow tie flicking through the air and ending into a toilet bowl in the cell with blood on it. And they said, you can have the severed head, but you've got to take out the bloody bow tie landing in the toilet.
Jesus Christ, get the hell out of here.
And it was, for its time, it was a huge success, but nobody knew it because it was at that moment in time when United Artists was crashing and burning.
The studio was in collapse. They were making Heaven's Gate. They were all in a panic. You'd walk down the corridor and people were sobbing in their offices.
And they lost the ability to give it a full national release. And instead they did what they used to call in those days, they bicycled the prince. They did regional. They went region by region. And they still made a phenomenal amount of money. But the financial success of The Beast Within was muted in Hollywood because the disaster that destroyed UA because of Heaven's Gate.
I'm just so delighted that there is this passion for the film that has built up in Japan, and not only Japan, but you know, the UK and all over the US.
Thank you very much. And you'll see the full uncut version.
Now, you could go out, you could do it with CGI, you could do it for almost no money with your computers. And I would love to remake The Beast Within.
The Beast Within was an experience. It was a crazy experience.
It is graphic, and don't be shocked.
And I'm in this liquor store, standing at a magazine rack, and I look over, and standing next to me, browsing through magazines, is Queen Latifah. And I had just seen the movie Chicago. So I spoke to her about this, told her she did a terrific job, and we're chatting a bit, and she looks at me and she says, "You look really familiar. Do I know you?" And I said, "Well, I'm an actor. You may have seen me in something." And she says, "Oh, tell me some things that you've done." So I'm mentioning a few things, the Quincy, A Death in Canaan, Promises in the Dark, no, whatever. And then I mentioned The Beast Within, and she went nuts. Her eyes got big as saucers. She points at me and she goes, oh my God, you're the guy, The Beast Within. I love that movie. She says, "I have seen that movie 5 times. Said, "My brother and I, we used to hide behind the couch. It scared the hell out of us."